Welcome to Bells Beyond Podcast by Bell Sisters. My name is Masichi, and I am your beloved host at Bells Beyond Podcast. We are a community-driven social enterprise building support systems for women entrepreneurs. And our community, of course, fosters safe spaces where these women can form genuine connection and grow together. And today we have with us Alexandra Pregalinska, who is the Vice Rector responsible for innovation and AI, and also an Associate Professor. Alexandra is the current Senior Research Associate at the Center for Labor and Just Economy at Harvard University, and she is also a former MIT Visiting Fellow. So she's passionate about AI. She's also a frequent keynote speaker and very passionate about AI in business. Alexandra advises companies on how to use AI for growth, and she promotes ethical and meaningful of AI across sectors. Welcome, Alexandra,
Mhm. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here.
and I'm very excited to have you. So, you do have quite the resume. Yes, yes, you do. So, can you tell us about yourself a little more, apart from the stuff that we know?
Sure, gladly. I actually am Polish originally. I'm from Warsaw, Poland, and I live both in Poland and in the US. As cumbersome as it is, sometimes I'm trying to kind of divide my life between Europe and here in the US. And obviously, like you mentioned, here I'm working with Harvard. We are very passionate about the future of work with AI and understanding how to essentially empower workers with artificial intelligence, because many of us know that it's not always the case that people feel empowered by AI. Some feel threatened by artificial intelligence. And I don't think it's a positive or good trajectory. I think this technology should amplify our work, should be supportive of what we do. So here at Harvard, we're trying to navigate that whole shift and figure out frameworks and ways of collaborating with AI that are good for workers, for us humans, right?
Mm.
And incubating the type of AI that would be very human centric. And beyond that, I've also worked and I'm continuing to work with a Polish university back home, Kosminski University, which is a great business school in Central and Eastern Europe, and I'm supporting them in all efforts regarding AI in education. Again, huge topic, how to introduce AI to education, well, in a way that again amplifies students' experience, but does not reduce their experiences, right?
Mm.
It's so easy to delegate things to AI, but essentially this is not what it's all about. We shouldn't have, an educational system where people essentially delegate writing essays to artificial intelligence and that's it, because that's not a good educational experience. So this is yet another thing that I'm working on, have been working on for a couple of years already. I would say that I'm lucky in a way because I am truly passionate about artificial intelligence, like you said, but I'm also equally passionate about having AI introduced or implemented with proper values, right? With the values that are supportive of us. And for the past 14 years, I've been preoccupied with ethical AI approaches to artificial intelligence that are meaningful to humans. And I've been working as a researcher and also in my more executive roles, right, as a vice rector or vice president of a university, exactly on these things. I'll just add maybe one more interesting thing, that I'm actually not a data scientist by training. I've learned it by myself in a DIY
Mm.
way.
Oh,
I did my PhD in philosophy. It was philosophy of AI, so I was already, interested in that. But I'm definitely coming from the pathway of social sciences. And currently, I'm a technologist. So I think it speaks to the fact that however we develop ourselves, however we kind of, choose in a particular moment in time regarding our career, we can always pivot. And that has been sort of my experience.
okay. First of all, wonderful introduction. I am amazed by all the things you're doing and you're continuing to do.
Mhm.
But there was something that really caught my attention when you said you're not a data scientist and
Yeah.
you're from the social science background and you were able to pivot. Can you talk a little more about that? Because I know that we have some of our listeners who have wondered, how do I get into AI? Or maybe how do I get
Yeah.
into tech? Or how do I just pivot into another industry? And it's something that they've looked at, and it looks like it's this huge mountain that you can't really
Right.
conquer. So how were you able to do that
Mm.
and do it so well that you are working in
Mhm.
this prestigious university?
Yes. Well, thank you for this question. Well, I think on a macro scale, I would say it's a good time to pivot, and it's a good time for people who are interested in multiple different things. So I think career-wise, we are moving from a phase of very narrow specialties where people were expected to know one thing and achieve an incredible level of expertise in that particular field, which would obviously make it hard for them to jump elsewhere because they spent all this time only studying this particular thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're moving towards an era, which I think is fueled by AI to a large extent,
Yeah.
where we will be generalists again, right? Where actually the fact that you have had multiple different attempts or experiences in different disciplines is going to be a benefit because people will be the ones supervising AI. AI will be doing that narrow stuff, quite often routine and very cumbersome. And we are, as humans, will have to set the goals, the intentions. We'll have to have the ambition to pursue certain projects and maybe deploy AI to help us out in that. So I would say if you are thinking about jumping to AI from another field, whatever it was or is, it's a good time to do that because AI is now a technology that does not pose that many barriers. It's easy to use artificial intelligence. It's easier to experiment with it because you just use natural language. You communicate with it, and essentially you can type whatever you want, put it as a prompt, you're getting your answers. And as you progress in using artificial intelligence, I would say your prompts are becoming more sophisticated, more refined, and you learn how to use the technology effectively. So I would say the field of AI is much more welcoming than it used to be like 10 years ago, where you even if you kind of considered jumping into the field of AI, you would first have to learn how to code.
Yeah.
Then you would have to learn statistics, afterwards machine learning, so you would have like at least kind of on the horizon 3 years of learning before that jump would even happen. And currently, I think is very different because all of us can use generative AI tools like, say, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, many others. And there are no such threshold or barriers. So that experience with AI can be set off in an easier manner. So that's one thing. In my case, I think I was looking for my pathway for a very long time, I have to tell you. So
Mhm.
I've been really interested in so many different disciplines. When I was in high school, my biggest passion was actually biology, cognitive science, the brain, human brain, etc. These were like my main fields of interest. But then I had a on parallel big passion for languages. And I kind of couldn't really channel it into anything. So I first started with a degree in communication because it felt like robust enough, big enough to kind of, maybe try and inspect different fields. And then I decided for philosophy, which was not something that, for instance, my mother was happy about. She was a bit concerned that I'm choosing such a lofty topic, and what will happen afterwards. You finish, your philosophy studies, you do that degree, and what's next? And I sort of, at that point already thought that since I have so many different interests, I would try and stay in the academia maybe, but I was
Mhm.
still looking for that, for that edge or like for that hook that could somehow maybe anchor all my interests. And I was very lucky because when I was doing my master's in philosophy, we had a professor who actually decided to start a course which was Introduction to Artificial Intelligence for Philosophers. And the
Oh.
idea, yeah, I think it was wonderful. And I'm very thankful to him for that because his idea was not to give us all the technical details of this technology, but rather expose us to the major questions that are coming together with
Mhm.
its arrival. You know, big
Mhm.
questions like, okay, what are humans going to do if AI takes over? To what
Mhm.
extent AI is similar to human? Can a mechanic brain be comparable to a human brain? And we were studying all these questions, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, some aspects of biology are definitely here. Human brain is here, communication is here, language is here. All these interesting things for me that I never could have anchored are here. So he was, in many ways, that person that inspired me to pursue artificial intelligence, but through the lens of social sciences and philosophy. So
Mhm.
when we anchored that, I started like thinking about my PhD, and then thankfully sort of my career progressed in that direction. And since the field was, well, not as known as it is now, but it was already like 10 years ago, already quite promising. I was lucky enough to find also many inspiring people on my way who are doing similar things, right? So they were studying AI from the perspective of, I don't know, childhood or, brain development. They were studying AI from the perspective of language. I came to MIT as a scholar, a Fulbright scholar, from Europe, and that was very eye opening to me. So in that way, I think I was lucky, but I think I also gave myself a bit of time to think about the things that are interesting for me and to insist on finding an umbrella that
Mhm.
could host, in many ways, all of them at the same time.
Yes. Wow. Oh my God. Just listening to you just gives me goosebumps because I am also like a multi-passionate person. And a lot of times I've been told to, niche down or focus on this. Or if you don't just focus on this, you're not going to make it. But in a way, I've been able to sort of channel all my interests and passions. And I mean, right now I am in entrepreneurship. I'm a full-time business owner. Yes. So basically,
Super.
it's like all the things that I have been learning in my, 20 something years of life. So actually now my question is, what would you say to a multi-passionate individual who is trying to
Mhm.
find themselves, trying to find that thing that can anchor all of what they know and all of what they
Mhm.
are interested in, at least under one umbrella?
Wow, that's a great question. And I'm obviously thinking immediately about what I would say to myself at that time because I was super confused. When I was in
Yes.
my very early 20s, I was very confused because I wanted to study all these different things and I felt pushed sort of in so many different directions. And I, at times, would feel also very overwhelmed with the fact that I did not know what the next step was. But I would say sit with that feeling, because it's all fine. I would say it to myself because I was very impatient at that time. And I immediately wanted to reveal what's that next step. But then, it took me a bit of time, and that struggle was very helpful because I could verify during that time of confusion and multi interest moments and different avenues opening up, which things are really important for me, which are like a core priority, and which are maybe, to some extent more of a hobby. So that is good to kind of, when you think about yourself as a person who has so many different avenues, to kind of maybe sit with that and try and prioritize to some extent, among these things, which is the one that, my heart beats most to, I think is sort of interesting. But then, like I started mentioning before, I think what's remarkable about the age of AI is that you can actually be that generalist. You can be that person who is pursuing many different things at the same time with the support of technology that to some extent can level our expertise. There's a lot of talk right now about the so-called human unicorn, which is, human equipped with artificial intelligence that can do many things that otherwise would have not been achievable. And I'm going to give you example. You mentioned you are an entrepreneur, and I think for entrepreneurs that's particularly important. My partner in life is a startupper. He's a serial entrepreneur, and he recently started like his new endeavor, and the way he started the whole ideation of what he would like to do and how to kick off the plan for a new venture and everything was actually with AI as a sparring partner. So AI would give him an advice, or somehow ideate or brainstorm what the next good step would be, whom to hire, and stuff like that. So he had that dialogue partner that allowed him to kick off, the whole project essentially without anyone's help. And then obviously at some point you do bring people in. You want to work with other people. We are social animals, and I'm all about community. But I think that early moment where you sit with yourself, but now you can also sit with AI and juggle some thoughts even with that system that is there to assist you is very interesting because you can pull off some things easily. All right. Think about all the content that can be created with AI. Think about reporting. Think about cumbersome things we never wanted to do, but also think about creative thinking, right? Where the intention is yours, the idea is yours, then kind of, you do a back and forth with artificial intelligence, and suddenly you have an incredible, food for thought for yourself. So I would say, to all the entrepreneurs, AI is an extremely helpful tool that multiplies in a way your competences and multiplies your activities as well. So that can be definitely used for good. I actually was at a conference. I went to a conference here at MIT in Cambridge like a week ago. And there were like a couple of different entrepreneurs who are showcasing their startup that looked incredibly ambitious. But it turned out there were just five of them, but they were five multiplied by five. But because each of them had a couple of different AI agents that was supporting them, in certain areas where they maybe lacked that full competence, they didn't know how to achieve certain things, and they got that support. So I would say it's super interesting time to try and think about AI as your leverage and to intentionally try and use this technology, not to pretend that you know something that you don't know, and with the help of AI you're kind of leveling that expertise a bit, but in fact to use it to maybe in a way prototype certain career pathways, certain experiences, certain possibilities, and then figure out through that little simulation with AI which one works best, and then make a decision about your next step. So I think, definitely a good and interesting time for entrepreneurs, to intentionally and ethically, I would say as well, use this
With
technology.
AI. Yes, no, I do think AI is quite helpful. I use it every day. Every day I talk to ChatGPT.
Mm,
I use ChatGPT and Cloud regularly. I use both of their paid versions just because
yeah.
it's been very helpful. And then yes, I do agree with you that you can use AI kind of putting your thoughts, that creative aspect of you, and then it maybe polishes it up or it gives you a little more idea. I guess what I'm a little, or what I would want to ask you, especially since that's your field, is those that use AI for unethical reasons. I'll give you an example. So
Mm,
I am trying to hire for an operations person in my company, and I was interviewing, right? I mean, because as the founder, you're the CEO, and the
yeah.
CFO, and the CEO, you're the C-suite. So I was interviewing, and I remember this girl. She came, so her resume was impeccable. It was good. It was great. And then the one-on-one interview, the one-on-one conversations, I would ask her a question. I realized that she would take maybe 30 seconds or something, right,
Uh,
to respond. And then her responses were very articulate. Of course,
uh,
at first I was very impressed. I was like, oh my gosh, she is so
mm.
eloquent. She can really express herself, properly. And then as I was asking the question, I realized that first her hands were down, so she was typing, and then she was kind of
Mm,
reading
mm.
from chat. And of course, if you're a regular user of chat or AI, you would notice the patterns in the way it, gives you responses. So at a point, I started to catch on, and I thought to myself, wait, is she responding? Am I speaking to ChatGPT right now? So I was talking to my business bestie, my business best friend, and I said, I am all for, AI. I mean, we use
Yeah.
AI daily in the business in the company, but how? how bad do you have to be that you cannot properly respond to
Yes.
behavioral questions? I'm not even asking you technical stuff,
Yeah.
behavioral questions, without the use of AI. So it was something that kind of really concerned me, and I was just thinking, as someone who is in that field, who is also a proponent of using AI for ethical purposes and ethical use. What would you say to this?
Yes, well, this is a great example of a misuse, I would say, and of an over reliance or even maybe addiction to this technology, which is definitely not a good avenue, right? So if you find yourself incapable of answering the questions that 5 months from now you would be able to formulate answer to, then that means you are a victim of a brain fry with artificial intelligence. You definitely over delegated to AI. And there is a whole body of evidence and experiments that are saying that over reliance and a lack of agency, so really delegating everything to AI, leads to you losing the expertise that you've already had quite rapidly, right? So you are good at something, and suddenly, after 5 months of overusing AI, you lost that core of yours. And that's really bad because, I mean, I think the best results with AI um, are those that we get when we merge our expertise, like I said, our intentions, our ambition, our goals, and our kind of mindfulness of where is it that we're going to go with artificial intelligence. However, when it's AI telling you how to do things and behaving sort of like your boss, this is probably not going to go right. And I have to tell you that we have also, as a team here at Harvard, we've done some experiments with putting AI as human bosses, which is not something I would like to see happening. That study was more so a warning sign that
Mhm.
people actually do lose creativity when they are supervised and micromanaged by artificial intelligence. Technologically, it's possible to do. You can have that AI tell you step by step what to do, how to write that perfect resume, where to submit it, what to say, like something that you've experienced at the interview. But essentially, it's not that person speaking to you. And frankly speaking, what you've remembered from that whole interview is very negative stuff. I'm not sure if that person is realizing fully the type of trace that she has left behind herself. And I, on that note, will just maybe mention one more thing. I spoke to my students. I have students back home in Poland that I also teach, and we've had that discussion where I told them, okay, you have this homework, and now it's up for you to choose whether you want to use AI in that homework or not. I wanted to make it your
Mhm.
sovereign decision.
Yes.
But yeah, but just remember one thing I said to them. If you all use AI, you will send me equally good and somewhat generic papers, and
Yeah.
I will not remember those papers. So it's your decision. You want to use AI in some capacity, deploy it, maybe reflect on how you've used it, give me your list of prompts or something, be transparent about how you use it. That's fine. Maybe some of you will choose to do it simply by yourselves without AI because you want to stand out. And maybe some others will just say, I don't want to be bothered. I'm just going to generate that essay. And
Mhm.
it's your responsibility and decision which pathway you decide to go with. And there were some students who have sent me papers that were not perfect, but they were theirs. They wrote it. So for
Mhm.
this special occasion, which was, the final homework with this course that I was conducting, they just decided that they wanted to stand out in this way, that it's a human and human input is that premium. And then there were some others who have used AI very creatively. And for those people, I only had, good things to say. And I was very happy with how they approached the problem. But there was obviously a smaller group that just decided to go the other way. And today I said, well, you've been here at this course, you've sent me this thing that you've generated with two or three prompts. It's definitely not good, it's satisfactory, and that's how I will remember it. So I think I
Mhm.
would say to that girl who decided to connect with you and just over rely on AI, that definitely it's not a future proof approach. I think to be remembered in a positive way.
Definitely not. Yes. It was something that really left a negative taste in my
Yeah.
mouth because I thought to myself, if I am hiring you as operations and you're going to be, kind of representing the company in some capacity. How do I trust you to be able to do that when you cannot even respond to
Right.
behavioral questions, which I think are, quite easy. But no, thank you for that, Alexandra, and also thank you for the examples that you gave with your students. There was something that you said about the ones that decided to write the papers themselves, that you would see some errors and you would
Yeah.
realize it's a human that wrote it. And I think that's also the beauty of, just being human. We're not really perfect. A lot of times when you see something, written by AI, it's just like very perfect. Well,
Hmm.
I would say almost perfect. And usually when I see it, I'll just be like, oh yeah, this is not you. This is just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I agree with you. And I will say to this that we can choose intentionally about when and where or which situations are best to deploy this tool.
Mhm.
And I say that because it's a different thing where you want to just maintain email communication with someone. You are
Mhm.
producing a business report with some metrics and you really want it to be perfect and executable and well written. I absolutely don't mind using AI
Yeah.
for all of that. We want good information, good quality stuff. However, if it's your essay, if it's your resume, if it's something that's important to a certain milestone in your life, it's really worthwhile to spend time on it as a human because this is an introduction to that new step in your life or a summary of all your achievements and here in these moments I really think that we should tune into our human self
Human self.
and
Yeah.
what we want to express because AI is going to lose that and even though it's going to be a beautiful essay ultimately it's not going to be yours and I think it's very important that people understand. And, a great example is LinkedIn. I cannot anymore read that generated stuff on LinkedIn because everybody's like generating huge amounts of like summaries and congratulations to one another, and it all looks the same.
Mhm.
And that's just something that we develop certain blindness to. We just don't care to read it. However, when you see really human emotion, even if that's an imperfect, post about something that somebody has observed, which they consider an important phenomena, and they just want to share, that really stands out. And I think it's the time where that verification of where you want to step in as yourself and where it's completely fine to rely on AI is going to be super important. That's critical thinking. These are the capabilities that we would expect from future leaders, I think, as well.
Yes, yes. So, on the topic of AI for ethical use and, just AI in general, can you maybe talk a little more about those that are scared that AI is going to take away their job
Mhm.
or they're going to be made obsolete as a result of AI?
Yeah. Well, it's a very complex topic, and definitely some leaders in the space of big tech are not helping out these days because when you listen to what Sam Altman has been saying or Dario Amodei from Anthropic, they're essentially projecting that 5 years from now there will be essentially zero knowledge workers, zero blue collar work for humans, and this is very scary. These are very scary visions.
Mhm.
So a bit of background: I'm obviously European, and in Europe we have a slightly different approach. So
Yes.
we are implementing AI, but we're a bit slower with that. Sometimes it's not so good because we're less competitive, but sometimes it creates that shield or umbrella that protects you also from negative effects of this technology because there's compliance, there are regulations, there are guardrails. You cannot just like that automate a process and
Mhm.
say that people are no longer needed in it. You can't do that. You have to kind of take humans into consideration. There are workers' rights in place, etc. In the US, I think the approach so far has been less guardrails and more speed, more acceleration, which
Mhm.
leads obviously to very impressive things because now with agentic AI, even with ChatGPT, you can do many, many very interesting things.
Mhm.
But I think what needs to be added to this equation is definitely what I mentioned at the beginning is that humans know where they stand. They kind of know that they have to advance, and they know that they have to embrace this technology to just simply work differently, but it
Mhm.
does not mean a jobless future. So for me, what's important, and frankly speaking, I think it's true, because Dario Amodei needs to say all the things he says in order to sell this technology, to create a certain hype around it.
Yeah.
We don't see such big shifts in labor statistics, but there are some concerns, right? So entry level workers definitely don't have a good time now. It's not easy to be an intern because AI
Mhm.
has taken over many of these roles. But
Yeah.
to the business leaders, I would just say, leaders, hey, if you don't have juniors, you will not have seniors. And also an
Definitely.
economy, yeah, and an economy where, people don't have the purchasing power because they're not working is not an economy that will sustain itself, particularly in the US. You know, people spending is 60% or 68 even of the US economy. So you want workers who earn good money and then are capable of spending them on products and services. This is how it all rolls. So ultimately, it's not a win for anybody to strive towards full on automation. And I am hoping that we will hear and see more of evidence of this trajectory where we implement AI into the organization, but just so that people can work more effectively or finally focus on the things that they've never had time to work on. And then, there are questions about choosing certain professions. I know that computer scientists feel a bit lost in this world where you can vibe code everything, right? We mentioned prior, generalists might have better opportunities now. It was incredible and very good for you to be a computer scientist for the past 20 years.
Yep.
Now, probably we will need more of them.
Yeah.
Sorry, less. In fact,
Less.
less of them than we used to.
Yeah.
But people with an open mind, people who are entrepreneurial, who are generalists, actually do gain a new opportunity in this, I
Yeah.
think, AI enabled economy. So that is good news. And I am hoping that with some guidance, guardrails, frameworks, companies will gradually learn to enable AI, but also, like, allow humans to progress in their professions.
Yes, no, I really like that. I also, what you said about computer science, I also found it very, funny and interesting because my background is actually computer science. I did a double
Oh,
major, yes, in computer science
oh,
and tech and applied design. And I remember then when I was, going into it, everyone and their mama, oh, go for a boot camp for 6 months. You'll become a software engineer. You'll start making 120,000, off the bat.
yeah.
Everybody was going into computer science. And then by the time I graduated college in 2020, I graduated in the peak of the pandemic. And that was
Yeah.
when the layoffs started happening little by little. But I mean, I was fortunate. I actually had gotten a job and I worked there for 2.5 years. And I said, no, I'm not doing this. I need Yes. So
Mm.
it's so interesting you say that because I actually pivoted from computer science and into the world of entrepreneurship where now I have my hands in everything and I'm just trying to learn this and trying to learn that and basically just
Yeah.
being a generalist. Um,
But yeah, I think whatever you studied has stayed with you. And I'm sure that this computer scientific backbone gives you great opportunities to work with AI in a more effective way. You're
yes.
going to be probably better with vibe coding than many other people because you know what you want from these models, how to control them, how to supervise them, how to set up different agents that would talk to one another, and an
Yeah.
orchestrator on top of that. So probably you'll be more skillful with that and will use it for your own projects, which is great, is a leeway. But I think that, yeah, you're right, that in general, traditional career pathways are, I think, going away. But in computer science in particular, you would see it as prominent, that certain approach that you just are hired in a software house and there's always like plenty of work for you. And, you are always capable of saying no to projects because you're that computer scientist, and this is
Yeah.
like exactly that ability that everybody seeks. No, that's going to change. And I think many people who have decided to study this will have to pivot to slightly different things and develop a new mindset where they can use those skills, because those skills are certainly usable in a world full of technology, but in a different
in a
way.
different
And
way.
maybe they will have to add some human skills to it, which I know to many computer scientists is not the best message, maybe. But I think it's actually true that when you have AI working with you and your coding is so much faster and you're hyper productive, you will spend more time with your clients, and you will have to develop a skill set of listening to them and interacting to actually create good projects, good products, and good solutions for them. So no, I feel that maybe for some computer scientists, but particularly the stubborn ones, it will be a challenge but an interesting opportunity at the same time.
Yes, no, definitely. Because I mean, yes, granted, a lot of us do need to develop really good soft skills as opposed to just the hard technical skills where you're behind the computer just, you
Right.
know, coding. So as we're, gradually getting to the end of this interview, what advice would you give to someone who is trying to get into AI for the first time?
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I would say that obviously try different things. So again, speaking maybe from that more European perspective, in Europe we have many small models. That's interesting
Mhm.
because in the US you have plenty of, or at least a couple of very powerful models that people use, subscription based. Like you said yourself, I also use Claude, obviously fantastic tool for research. But I'm trying to plot my experience with AI in such a way that I actually get to use diverse tools. I just don't rely on one. I don't rely only on ChatGPT, right? I don't stick to it. I'm trying to figure out what would be other interesting complementary tools, for different things, because all of these models differ. And in Europe, like I started saying, we have many open source small models that are trained on different languages, and they work in a different way, than those big, like, or giant even Geminis or ChatGPT. So I would say adopt a more pluralistic mindset. Try out
Mm,
different models. Figure out which ones work best for you for specific tasks. And you will see easily that there are models that are great at storytelling, and then there are models that are great at structuring arguments, and then there are models that are great at coding, and they are different. And I think just from the onset, figuring out different pathways with different models is a very good advice. And then the other thing is obviously to learn. There's plenty of knowledge out there. I know it's very scattered, maybe it's good to take a couple of courses, massive online open courses. In Finland, there is this great course that is available to anybody worldwide called Elements of AI. And then
mm,
there are, schools that are more meticulously teaching you how to build agents, which is a bit harder than just talking to ChatGPT.
mhm,
I'm, a part of a startup called Campus AI that is trying to do exactly that, agnostic AI education, sort of in in a more advanced way and sector specific. And I think there are a couple of projects out there that are trying to do the same. So I would say spend some time on solid education with AI, understand limitations of the models, understand possibilities, but
mhm.
also really have that pluralistic, agnostic mindset where you don't just habituate yourself to just one model, but instead you try out different
All
options
the
because they
different
keep on
ones.
updating. So
Yeah.
that would be the best way. And bring a lot of your expertise. Think about what's interesting for you, what you have studied already, and how that can be merged with AI. There will be many new specialties. There will be lawyers who will be working specifically on AI regulations. There will be composers who will be working with AI to generate
Mm,
specific sounds. There will be people who are in accounting and are doing, like, some sort of optimization specifically with artificial intelligence. So look through the lens of your actual hobby or interest and
mhm.
think about how AI can maybe add meaning to
True.
that stuff that you do. Be intentional about it. I think that's important.
Okay, definitely. You did mention, I know you said like in Europe there are a little more tiny models that are being used. So
Yeah.
do you have any that you would recommend that it's not the big ones we all know, like
Yeah.
Chat and Claude?
Well, I would say one very interesting model that is French and actually could be a competitor to those large models because it's very well trained is Mistral. That's a French model. subsidized by the French government, and many French companies that we know worldwide are actually using this model internally. So Mistral. Another model that I have used a lot, and it's fully open sourced, open weights, open parameters, open data, open training, so very transparent. It's called Apertus, and that's a Swiss model developed in Zurich. So these are like probably the two ones that come to mind. We also have, I'm Polish, so we have a model Bielik that is Polish that recently joined the NVIDIA stack, NVIDIA ecosystem. So
Oh,
it's quite a success story.
wow.
And yeah, and it's trained on Polish data. And it's, a voluntary effort of people who just worked for free to make it happen. So it's pretty special. And
Oh,
I think it's really cool to kind of familiarize yourselves with different models that are out there. Obviously, there's the Chinese DeepSeek. I know that there are models being built in India. I would assume in Africa as well. There are some new efforts. So it's not all about, like you said, those commercial models that we know a handful of, but in fact, it's a big, big world of many, sometimes smaller, but very capable and interesting models that are in other parts of the world.
I'm actually intrigued by that because that was
Good.
actually why I asked you about, recommendations because that's something that I
Yeah,
do want to go back and look into.
super.
Yes. Okay, Alexandra. So, what would you like to leave our listeners with before we end?
Hmm. I think with a positive message, and please don't get carried away by AI hype. There is a lot of craziness around AI, speculations, and ultimately, a lot of those speculations is for the purpose of selling products. So be mindful of that fact. Don't get scared also, because feeling afraid of AI is a demobilized type of emotion that is not kind of urging you to push harder. It's an emotion that leaves you kind of lost. So I think neither hype nor incredible AI fear are good attitudes. Try to stay realistic, but learn, observe, include your critical thinking all the time. And I think if you progress in that direction, even with this crazy AI era, disruptive as it is, you'll still be fine.
Definitely. Thank you so much for that message, Alexandra. So you all had it here. And now if you're also listening and you've been also craving, a community conversations like this, a place where you don't have to figure it out alone. Bell Sisters exists for you. And to our guest, Alexandra, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. I really, really enjoyed this. I actually did learn a lot. So thank you so much for coming. And I will see you all in our next episode.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation again. Bye bye.